Hi there, this is Dennis Velco with OutBüro. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of OutBüro Voices, where we have engaging conversations with LGBTQ professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders from around the world. And today, our guest is Kevin Shah. He's going to talk all about his background and his company called Jaago. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to join other fellow entrepreneurs who are focused on such amazing mission, and even OutBüro's mission and what they're trying to achieve and what you're trying to achieve is amazing. So thank you. It's a great opportunity.
Well, cool. Well, I always like to start off with a little bit of your professional history.
Yeah.
You didn't wake up probably one day and just go, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur. And this is what I want to do. Most people kind of have a little bit of a winding path along their creating a company and getting to that point of realizing they have something that they would like to do. So if you could give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I am an immigrant to the United States. I came in 2005 to do my bachelor's in computer and electrical engineering. I did it in Florida, Florida Tech, Florida Institute of Technology. And right after I graduated was 2009, and the financial collapse had happened, and there weren't any jobs available, very few jobs available for immigrants. And I graduated. I was the president of the student body. I had like a great resume. They'd given me all the awards they could that year, but I still couldn't find a job. And I spent 2 months looking for a job, and I found a job locally in Melbourne, Florida, where I was able to put TV on planes. So when you fly JetBlue or when you fly United and you have the screens in front of you and you had live TV, I was one of the people that actually made it happen. I was on the last part of it. And I spent 4 years as an engineer there, and then moved into product management, business leadership within the company. And that was all expanding from now just TV to internet as well. And what I did was I sort of spearheaded the movement of transforming those planes, once they're connected, from just planes to Internet of Things devices, sensors, so that now we can get data in real time and manage a lot of these things, the aircraft traffic and operations efficiently in real time. And that was a big innovative change. That led me to be able to get my MBA from University of Central Florida. And then 3 years ago, 2017, my husband, our little dog, and we moved to Seattle to join a company where we made tech for law enforcement, for public safety. So anywhere from body camera software, taser software, drones, and anything to do with public safety to help protect life, to help drive accountability. And I did that. I did a lot for that company. It was a really busy time. But in 2020, when George Floyd's murder happened, there was a moment of pause. There was a moment of reflection. The company's stock hit an all-time high, and it felt disgusting to see that someone's murder makes a small group of unrelated people wealthier. And there was a moment of pause, and it did. And then I saw the police using the products that I was building. I was disrupting the communication space in public safety and building these real-time operations, and with the hope that the police will be using it to drive better decisions in real time for the betterment of the community. But I saw a police department using those against the protesters, to the point that one of them shared with me that it was so effective that we arrested 200 people and broke their spirit, so they didn't come back and protest the next day. And that just broke me. I didn't have a job lined up or another plan. I resigned. I gave up a $15 million contract, which I would have stayed. I would have gotten for over 8 years. And I was sitting on my couch with my husband. We were watching this documentary on Netflix called Crip Camp. It's an amazing documentary that about the civil rights movements of people with disabilities. And I was like, why can't more people just watch this? I have been a student of empathy. I've been using empathy as my differentiator. That's how I got my job when I was an immigrant. That's my whole arc of growing and passing on, is I was able to wield the superpower of empathy to help drive that, to help be successful. And like, why can't just people watch content like this? So I had that moment where like, how do we scale empathy? How do we get people to understand the value, the superpower, the ability of the real delivery of empathy that can sort of give you better customer service, can you better financial outcomes, can you happier employees, more productive employees, higher retention? How can we do that? And that what started was Jaago. Jaago means to wake up in Hindi. So the idea was to let's create a world where people seek to understand each other. And all of this was happening around where the protests were happening, and the community and our country and the world is polarizing. So I was like, how do we bring a solution that actually can bring people together? And so it created this solution which empowers everyone's story to help, sort of like an empathy gym, to help people learn empathy.
Okay, well, let's back up just a little bit and unpack a little bit about your career.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you were in the development of, for lack of better terms, the telecommunication space, and the media space. And so you were a software engineer?
I for 4 years, I was a computer electrical engineer. I was doing integration and test. And then I became a product manager. So in the tech, that's sort of a relatively new role. But product management is basically you just determine the why we building something, and the what is like, okay, what are we building? And then you work with engineers and designers to go build it. So you're sort of like the mini CEO of the products. So you're responsible for it. And that's what I did for 13 years.
Yes. Okay. Gotcha. Yes. A product manager, and there's for folks listening out there, I was also a product manager, a software product manager.
Oh, nice.
So for a while, and so a product manager builds kind of what's called the use cases. As to we have customer Susie sitting on the plane. She's bored and wants something to do. So we're going to provide interactive video games, television entertainment, and so forth to keep Susie occupied so that she enjoys her travels. And that's a simple
that's a great one. Yeah, I like to used to say that so they don't bother the flight attendant.
Yeah, stop asking for those little packets of peanuts. And so you have had the experience of defining what a product is, whatever that type of product is going to be. And there's product managers in all categories. There's product managers for food industry, for cosmetics, for all kinds of industries out there. So that term for our listening audience isn't only about technology, but I do understand how important that is, because a product manager really, as you said, is kind of the CEO of the product. They have to understand the user, the end consumer, or the passenger in your case. What is driving them? What is that? You have to create a persona for that user. A persona, folks, is, and I have some articles on developing a persona, and you have to know as much about that consumer/customer as possible. What is their price points? What is their pains? What are you trying to achieve with it? And then build your use cases to meet those. So you went from being a product manager with a huge potential cash horizon to going, I don't give a shit. I'm just going to leave this because I don't value what's happening. That's pretty powerful. So they're still in business, though.
They're doing really well, and I definitely their mission is bold. They want to protect life. But what I noticed was the result. Even the intention is very positive. At least what I got to see, in my opinion. I'm sure the company still has a differing opinion. My opinion is we are still taking advantage of the current system, not completely changing the system. They're band-aiding the system, and I saw that we couldn't actually change the system because it was very obvious when someone was killed by the police, the company made more money. It just, you can see the dots if you connect it. even though if you have the positive intention, if the results are not matching that, I was afraid of the results. I was afraid that my superpower of coming with empathy and being an empathetic product manager would further help the system. Even they're currently selling into the prisons, the federal and state run prisons. And I also think that complete system needs to be overhauled. So we're basically, it was a situation where I just felt value conflict through and through.
And that's a real problem in all of technology. One of the first few interviews that I did, it was unfortunately before I started doing video. But folks, check out, I'll put a link in his down below. He's an artificial intelligence. And the name is escaping me right now. I don't want to stop and look it up, but he's Canadian in the Montreal area and is in artificial intelligence. And we talked heavily about the ethics of technology, and just like getting into the there's the good side of technology, there's the convenience factor, there's the the thought of doing something good, but everything has the potential to be used in a wrong way. Take our smartphones for an example. The amount of intrusiveness that happens by corporations, all in the name of the dollar. You can't possibly do anything on the internet today without it going into some huge government database, and they know that you ate at this Chinese restaurant 3 times a month for the last year. So I definitely can understand. And there's a lot of concern around the ethics and privacy and so forth. So in using was that really kind of the pull for you? Was it just that shareholders were getting such an incredible amount of value?
The company, they even created, they were the first company to create an independent AI ethics board that was made from the community and various stakeholders to help guide. And they were the first company to say, we're not going to do facial recognition. So they definitely have a lot of positive intent. They work but at the end of the day, they're working in the system. They're selling directly to the police. So the police are going to buy what benefits the police. That's the reality of it. They're in the business for them to make money. If they can't just go disrupt the system. Otherwise the company will go under. And that's the difference, is I thought I couldn't change it from inside the system. So what's happening is, I noticed the data, which was, why did the police adopt body cameras? It wasn't Ferguson, Missouri. Yes, that Ferguson, Missouri event, when that happened, police were like, yeah, we got to have body cameras. The community started yelling. But the police were adopting the technology, or any solutions that they're buying because it helps them. It's not because it helps the community. For example, the body cameras, the data is saying that more police complaints are canceled because of body cameras. So because that's such a headache that goes away from the police, they're like, oh, I don't have to share my story and go to court and do all of these things anymore, because I can just show the video and the police complaint is canceled. Now, that's a good thing, because any false complaint should be canceled. But it's a benefit that first benefits the police over the community, and then it had the benefit of the community as well, and accountability. Same thing when they were adopting the taser, the electrical weapon. You could see that it benefited. They resisted getting it first. They were like, we're fine with our gun and our baton, or our pepper spray and our gun. They're emotionally attached to the gun. But the taser was adopted because they noticed that the worker comp complaints went down, because they didn't have to go hands-on and fight someone. They could just from a distance use the taser and get the same effect. So it benefited them personally and personal safety. Again, this is not a negative. It is a positive. People should be able to feel safe on their job. But that's how the adoption goes for any of these products. So my concern was, there is this high level of resistance in the system. So if a community of people say, today you're going to take all the video footage that the police collect, and it's going to be part of an independent committee or an independent review outside the police department, that they're going to own it. I guarantee you the police are going to say, no, it's going to not go well. Because currently all video that is recorded is controlled by the police department itself. Now, yes, there's FOIA requests. Yes, there's other ways of getting that information out, but it's very specific, has to be surgical and right context, and all of those things come into play. But
Gotcha.
And so those are the changes that I think I couldn't have made from inside the system. And I was like, well, now I'm just contributing to a system that I'm against. And in that case, I had to leave.
Okay. Well, I commend you for taking such a bold move and walking away from what a lot of people would find difficult to do. And so how did that again kind of come into your idea of Jaago?
Yeah, so just like you did, you talked about product management and the role, and you did it so well. You talked about the use case. If you notice, the use case, the whole act of drafting a use case is an act of empathy. You have to put yourself in the perspective of your user, of your customer, and say, as a passenger, as a police officer, as a community member, you are putting yourself in someone's perspective. So empathy has been a really core part of why I was a better product manager, why I was an effective product manager, because I was able to practice empathy very effectively, and I was doing it every day as a habit. So that was one sort of input data point. The second is I used to also facilitate LGBTQ safe space training, safe zone training. So go to, in the companies, being able to spend a couple hours and talk about various umbrella terms within the LGBTQ space and privileges, and how to create those safe spaces for everyone, not just LGBTQ folk, but just everyone, but using that as the platform. All of that sort of experience informed me. So when I left the company and I was trying to figure out what's next, I was really passionate about how do we solve the polarization issue that's happening in our community, where one right and one left, we're extremely getting polarized. Why are we not listening to each other? We're yelling past each other. We're tweeting at each other. We're not listening to each other. We're not listening. At this point, we're not even agreeing on facts. That's where we are. We're not even agreeing on the same facts. So
wait a minute. Facts? Oh, you are so radical. Hopefully facts will become important again.
I hope so. What I want is we want to have common facts that we agree on, right? Like if we both say that this is number 5, that's good. That's progress, right? Right now we're saying this is number 5 and the other person's saying, no, it's not number 5. I don't believe it's number 5 because it's not going to benefit me, or it's happening on both sides. And so like, why? And so today, if you share your story, or if I share my story, you are not able to refute that. You can't come and say, Kevin, your story is not valid. It's not a fact. You can't, because it's my story. It's something that is informed my experience. And so what I did is, how do we empower everyone's story? We only see the exceptional stories on movies and TV shows and news, but everyone's story matters. Your story, like even like the story about learning how to floss for the first time at the age of 32, or buying your first new car at the age of 40. Those are stories that are relatable stories. Today, if I tell you a story about how I'm a pilot and I landed a plane and saved 300 people, great story. We'll make a great movie. But will you be able to relate to that? You wouldn't, because you're not a pilot, because you will never experience that situation in your life. But if I tell you, I went to the grocery store and I was just walking and someone called me a terrorist, you could relate to that. Or I was just going to the grocery store and I saw an old lady and she helped me pick out the right ingredients to make a beautiful cake for New Year's. You can relate to that story. So now you are able to understand me better. You're able to understand where I'm coming from, what my experience is. And in fact, you'll be like, oh, that's a very similar experience to me. Even though that person is an immigrant, even though that person is brown, or even though that person might be trans, whatever that might be, whatever the intersectionality comes into play, you are able to understand me and relate to me in a better way. And that's what stories do. And so that led to how do we reduce that polarization? How do we create a habit for people where empathy becomes a practice and idea of superpower? And so that's how Jaago came up. And I was like, the people who are most likely to adopt it right now, the most urgently, are companies. Companies are focusing on diversity, equity, inclusion training. if they are doing it, and if they do have budgets, they either hire someone and then they sort of say, now go figure it out, or they do once a year training or once every 6 months. And data is showing that those trainings expire after 48 hours. Why? Because you can't just go to a personal trainer once a year and say, give me a six pack, and then not do anything rest of the year. You have to build behaviors. You have to change your habit. You have to be uncomfortable with discomfort. You have to grow. And so I was like, how do we operationalize DEI? How do we create those initiatives in companies? And there, the companies have budgets. Companies are spending $8 billion annually as of 2019. It's much more now on diversity, equity, inclusion. In 2020, the number one C-suite job was head of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the United States. Companies have realized the power that effective diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives and a place where their people belong can deliver better financial results, more innovative products, better customer service. That's just a differentiator in itself. It's a competitive advantage that you can never lose.
Absolutely. And, just to kind of reiterate one of the points that you made is, and it's for our listening audience and viewing audience, think about what skills you have tried to acquire over your lifetime. And, if you would, go ahead and take a few moments down below in the comments on whatever application that you're viewing or listening this to, and share what your hobby is. Share what hobbies you have. And those hobbies had to be learned, even if it was making model airplanes. You bought the kit, it took time. Maybe your first couple of model airplanes kind of looked a little wonky. Maybe you didn't paint them with great care because it was new to you. But over time, you become proficient in doing whatever you do on a regular basis. Let's say you want to learn, let's say you want to play a sport. Okay, so you wake up one day, you go out to the sporting goods store, you buy yourself a couple of tennis rackets and tennis balls, you go to the clothing store, buy a cute outfit or something like that, like a lot of people do. They believe if they dress the part, all of a sudden they're going to be fantastic at the sport. But what you wear doesn't make up your ability to play that sport, right? You have to practice that sport. You have to, possibly get a coach, and you have to learn how to swing that tennis racket up properly, or you might injure yourself. Okay. So learning any new skill takes practice. And one of the things that is scientifically proven, folks, you can Google this, is that a lot of the ingrained beliefs and the way that we see the world is formed by the age of 7. I forget who said it, but it was a famous psychologist or scientist. He said, show me a young person at 7, and I will see it was an old time ago, so please don't think of the gender, but I'll try to say it as correctly as possible. He said, show me a boy at 7 and I will see the man. Because so much when we are children, we are basically almost in a hypnotic state of absorbing information all around us, and we learn our basic brain programming from our surroundings. So for an example, if you have God forbid, Buddha forbid, that you have a father that disrespects your mother when you are a young child, beats her on a regular basis, etc., that person, without great intervention, is going to grow up disrespecting women, treating women harshly, and possibly go to jail over that. But those kind of things take a long time to unprogram. And there's these, in several of our episodes, we talked about the neurological pathways. And so you have to be conscious of what your thoughts are. So for an example, I was dating a guy for a little while, And he just became angry at anything, everything. I mean, just someone not turning their blinker on to change a lane. He would get so irate. Twice I had to ask him to pull over into a parking lot because he scared me so horribly. I thought he was going to crash the vehicle. I was truly in fear for my life. He would get that irate. And as I learned through chatting with his mother, that he was nothing in compared to his father. And that kind of ingrained reaction to overly anger reaction to basic stimuli that, most of us just fluff off. It's like, oh, big deal, was learned. And so I get to your point where learning empathy and learning about others is not necessarily a natural thing for people. We're so consumed in our own lives and so consumed with those people in our immediate sphere, and they tend to be very much like us, right? And
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
so
We're attracted to the homogenous.
yeah. So share with us a little bit more about the Jaago platform
Yeah.
and how that all works.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story. Appreciate it. That's an example of a Jaago story in 3 minutes or less. Like I was now able to understand you better because you shared that story, and it took vulnerability and courage. And that's exactly what we're achieving and trying to do with Jaago. With Jaago, it's a mobile app-based platform, so it's available right now. You can download it from both iOS and Android app stores. You you download, and you first thing you do is you create an intersectional profile. We in fact put our promise out there that we will never share your data outside with ads with any other company, and including your employers. This is something that we want to create, a private safe space where people feel like this is their space. So that's our first intention. Then you learn about intersectionality. Everyone has different intersectional dimensions that come from. So you create your profile, so you understand your gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, age, ethno-racial group. And then you start watching stories. And we say 6 minutes a day. So you watch 3 minute long stories, 3 minutes or less. You watch a story, and then immediately after you watch a story, so first thing you do is deep listening. You start learning deep listening, which is really powerful when it comes to work. And then you answer 6 questions, real quick, multiple choice that come right after. And these are the question. First one is, how did this make you feel? The first step is about self-empathy. We teach you self-empathy to make you empathetic for yourself, which is a very important step in learning empathy. The second is, how do you think the storyteller felt when they were telling the story? So you select from a list of options. And when the storyteller was uploading the story, they've answered these questions as well. So we can then match and say, hey, did you match with what the storyteller said? So now you can then get immediate feedback and say, oh, maybe I matched. Great. I was able to put myself in their perspective or understand them better. Oh, I didn't match. Then you start reflecting. Why did I not match? What happened? The third question is, what do you think the storyteller was feeling when they were living the story? So there's 2 types of empathy you're coming in. One is you're understanding what they're saying and putting that in that perspective. And then you're trying to put yourself in that situation, the story that you're saying. So when you were sharing your story about the person you were dating and how you had to pull out the car and stop it and then learn about it, I was putting myself in your position. I was trying to put myself, how would I feel? How would I feel if I were in that situation? How would Dennis feel if I was in that situation? And so that creates that empathy, those neurons, and connects those neurons and help build that empathy muscle. And then the other 3 questions are more about how much did your outlook change on this topic? Because each story relates to a certain theme. So how much did your outlook change about this topic? So it's a reflection question to say, wait, did I learn something new? And then the next thing is, would you recommend this story to others? So this is one to see, okay, would you recommend other people to watch this story? And the last is, would you like to thank the storyteller for their courage? Recognizing that vulnerability, sharing a story is a courageous act. It's a powerful act. And you recognize that. So instead of instead of clapping and all of those things, we are saying it's courageous. So let's recognize and call it courage. And then you get a reflection question that you can take away with and then you finally get a score. You get to see your own score. You get to see how this is growing. It's a little gamification. So you get to see a little bit of what your level is, how well you're matching, how many themes you've explored. So you get to sort of track that progress as well. And then you get to share your own stories if you want within the public library, or if it's part of a company, then you get to share within the company's private library. So all the employee scores are anonymized and then becomes the company score. So the company can advertise the score publicly. So they can say that we are putting a commitment into learning empathy, into diversity, equity, inclusion. So attract really amazing talent because of that. And their private library, you mentioned that, oh, we only are focused on our team. And that's a big problem in companies, silos. People focus just on their teams. And then the other teams are just like any other company. How do you break those down? By having stories within the company in context of the company. So now you start understanding each other and you build a stronger culture within the company itself.
Okay, very interesting. I'd like to back up for just a moment because the audience is wide, and we could have all kinds of different people viewing or listening to this. So what kind of struck me is that there might be people in our audience who don't know the term intersectionality and what that means. Could you give us a good explanation of that?
Yeah. So this is something that is becoming more apparent, is when we say, oh, this is the experience of a person of color, or this is an experience of someone who is Black or someone who's an immigrant, we're actually then, what we're doing is we're taking one part of their identity, immigrant, or their skin color, whatever that might be, and we're saying that experience for everyone is the same. So we're actually removing that person, and we're just sort of saying everyone who is Black has this experience. And that's not the case. That's not the reality. The reality is each person has their own experience based on various aspects of their identity that intersect. So intersectionality is the person where these various aspects of the identity intersect. Gender, sexual orientation, it could be education, it could be socioeconomic status, it could be disability. All these various aspects of my identity intersect and make me as a person. And that gives me my own unique experience. So what we need to do is, when we start talking about intersectionality, we're trying to say is, don't just sort of paint over the everything is the same. So don't say all the Black people have the same experience, or all the immigrants have the same experience. They don't. And what it's doing is actually getting you to what a human is. A human is an intersection of various identities, various experiences. And so we're recognizing that. We're getting people to understand that, so that we can then say, let's now understand each human and not just try to stereotype or just try to sort of paint over with one part of their identity.
Great. I'm going to expound on that just a little bit. Yeah. And, I've had a saying, or at least an understanding for a while, that everyone comes with their own filters, the way that they view the world, see the world, and interact with the world. And there's, studies and scientific information, based on that. And it gets to the intersectionality point. It's like, based on your ethnicity, based on perhaps if you were raised in a particular spiritual faith or not, based, as you mentioned, based on your education. So someone who is a cisgender Caucasian male, they will have a different worldview than someone who is also cisgender Caucasian male, who grew up Catholic, who went to an Ivy League school versus a public school, perhaps. And all of the experiences of a person create and shape the worldview and creates their quote unquote intersectionality. So almost everything affects. And the beautiful thing about that is, because of those different lived experiences, I have a different, perhaps different way of viewing those use cases that we were talking about earlier, and writing those use cases than perhaps you, because you grew up in another country, an immigrant, a person of color, and maybe a different spiritual background, and so forth. And so that is how people come to see the world differently. And, folks, have you ever had someone, unlike that person that I was dating for a short while, who would blow up at every little thing, but just, have a conversation or interact with someone, and you kind of go, holy crap, why did they react that way? That's like no big deal. They just like just it upset them. Well, maybe one of those things would be that intersectionality is that maybe they're a rape survivor, and maybe they are a little bit more sensitive to someone's, invading their personal space because of that lived experience. And so that would be part of their intersectionality of understanding that there's, and there's no limit to the amount of intersectional points on a person. It's just realizing, for an example, to make it very clear to you, I'm cisgender, Caucasian male, grew up in a very right-wing evangelical experience. I, though, have learned to appreciate all world religions and assimilate that. I'm a U.S. military veteran. I'm also an artist, a painter. I'm an adoptive parent. I'm a business owner, prior Fortune 100 level consult. So all of those things shape my view of the world around me. And then it therefore also shapes how I interact with people, because I have that experience. And it's kind of like military folks out there can probably resonate with this. When you meet, if you are a veteran of any military and you're going to a barbecue with new people, and all of a sudden you hear in conversation that this person over here also is a U.S. or a military veteran, you might go over and start a conversation with that person because you have that commonality. And therefore you have that as a basis in your intersectionality to build a 30-minute conversation over a couple of beers with. And so just trying to make it very plain and simple so that all of you can understand what that big word is, because when you're looking at articles or reviewing, lots of people have talked about intersectionality within my interviews, but we've never really talked to it about it at that level. And so anywho, I just thought it'd be nice to take a few moments to really delve into that so that people understand how and why that's important, because it's truly the foundation of yourself, and again, how you view the world, how you view yourself, how you view the world, view other people, and interact with one another.
Thank you, Dennis. That was such a great further explanation. I appreciated you sharing further. Your vulnerability, your strength is so apparent, and so thank you for doing that. And I was thinking through that as well as, hopefully the listeners, they'll watch and they'll sort of take a moment to reflect and sort of think about their intersectional identities that they come into, and how that is sort of shaping their worldview, their experiences, and how they interact, and not try to. So one of the things we talk about is, let's not try to say, oh, that person is immigrant, so this is how they would behave, and make assumptions. So what intersectionality helps us do is remove those assumptions. It's trying to unlearn those things that we learned, and like you said, at the age of 7 and earlier, and during our childhood in the growth years, we're trying to unlearn those. So what intersectionality does is, by understanding that, is instead of going in with any assumptions, you go in with curiosity and questions to any interaction. And you go in with, oh, these are my pronouns, or this is how I do, and then invite space and create an inclusive space for people to share theirs. So now you're actually creating that connection, human to human connection, instead of saying that person is an immigrant, so they are taking away my job. But that's not the case. In my case, I'm an immigrant, but I spent thousands of dollars to come here. I didn't take more. I actually helped create more jobs than I took more job or any of those, because I got a job because they couldn't find someone else in the United States to do that job. So those are the stories that help shape. So thank you for expounding on that. Really loved it.
Awesome. And so, how did you come up with the 3 minutes? I mean, when we first chatted about that, I got to be honest with you, I was like, holy crap. I just get started at about 3 minutes into a conversation. Anyone who watches my videos and interviews know I can talk. And so I was pondering and getting ready for this conversation. I just was like, wow, what kind of story could I tell in 3 minutes? So, what
Yeah.
do you have guidelines? Do you
Yeah.
have, what do you recommend for someone? Is it to like maybe watch several of the videos
Yeah.
to kind of get ideas?
Yeah, great question. So first data point is when you shared your story about your ex, the person you dated, that was actually less than 3 minutes. You shared a story and I was able to do it and understand it. So it was in the interview, you didn't realize it happened. And I actually kept like, oh, that's a 3 minute story right there. Yeah, some stories are longer, but what we have is within the app and on our website, a guide on how to sort of build your story. And so we recommend watching a couple of stories within the app before you sort of upload your own. So why the reason we picked 3 minutes is I used to make films. I used to make short films, independent films when I used to be in Florida. And so I had a lot of sort of experience on YouTube and sort of building out audiences on YouTube as well. Currently, we're like 20,000 subscribers, 6 million views on my first film. And so I was able to see that the 2.5 to 3 minute mark is when you start losing people. And that's when you sort of the attention span goes away, right? So there's that point where it's like, okay, how much can we focus on the deep listening? And then also that micro bursts of learning. People can't spend more than that time in a specific thing because life is just full of things that are going on. And specifically when you're asking people who have jobs and to focus in on this as well, it just becomes harder. But if you actually think about it, we talk about a script. It's like, hey, tell us about a specific situation. When you narrow down something to one specific incident or situation, that incident situation can be explained in less than 3 minutes. In fact, most of my stories that I've recorded are nowhere close to three. It's like closer to 2 minutes, and those are deeper situations, and people have watched them and moved. Are like, oh wow, that was great. Because when you just narrow it down to a specific incident around various themes that you can choose, it can be done in less than 3 minutes. And what we're saying is you don't have to go into every detail. You don't have to go into every specific nuance because that can bring up trauma, that can trigger, that can do all various things. But what we want is let's talk about what was the situation, what happened, and what was the result. And if you just sort of structure it in that, you can easily bring it into that 3 minute story. It's like, okay, I was driving with I used to date this person. I went and the person happened to just be very aggressive towards me, and then one time we stopped. I got so bad that I had to ask them to stop the car, and we talked, and then I talked to their mom and I learned about this, and this was the experience. And now I learned about two people in that situation, you and that person. And that was an incredible story. So that's where the 3 minute comes from. And the idea was if we do 2 stories a day, so you can see that every story, every theme, 2 stories a day around a specific theme, and every theme has different perspectives. It breaks down the idea of assumptions. Like, no, not every person has the same experience. A religious person can have 2 different experiences, or a trans person can have 2 different experiences. So that was the idea of 6 minutes a day. And at 6 minutes is easy chunk. You can do it while you're commuting, while you're sitting in the bathroom, while you're bored. Instead of scrolling through Twitter, you can just spend 6 minutes and do that. And it really can help bring so much reflection, and it makes you feel better at the end of the day.
Oh, well, wonderful, wonderful. And so how far along are you in this? How long have you been working on this? And, give us a little bit of that timeline and kind of where you, as an entrepreneur, where you're trying to take this and who your ideal target audience is.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we've been working on this for approximately 6 months, my co-founders and I, and we launched in December. We have started collecting. So we have 2 audiences. One is everyone we want everyone's story. We don't want to bias the system by curating. We want everyone's story. So we're targeting the consumers who I'm now starting to call explorers, because I think the world of consumer is dead. It's the world of exploration that's coming in. And so the explorers I target, and so they bring them into the stories so they can share their stories. And then my revenue and my focus is towards companies, towards organizations who understand the value of diversity, equity, inclusion already and are looking to operationalize it and make it effective. And those are the companies that I'm targeting. And so we're at a point where we're going to be kicking off beta testing and trials with various companies. So the app is live. So it's available for free for all to use and test it out. You get to watch 6 stories a day. We actually cap you so you don't binge it. So we don't want to overload you. And then the idea is we're going to be generating stories, which we have now, and we're going to be taking it to companies, and then the companies are able to then start getting their employees to start using it and provide it as a benefit to the employees. So the employees can see the company cares about me. This is not just a check the box training or a compliance training. This is something that, just like a sleep app or a meditation app or a mental health app or a solution, this is something to help me become better at my job. It's a learning opportunity.
Awesome. And I could definitely see some good benefit in utilizing this, not only as an employee in a company, but also how this can affect just people in general. Mm-hmm. And, just thinking about learning, because it's really learning about people. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, learning how to be empathetic and therefore listen and communicate. So for folks out there, this could possibly help you in your relationships of all kinds of relationships, your work relationships, your relationships with family, your relationship with your significant others, and so forth. So very interesting.
One thing I say, Dennis, in that point is it actually gives you influence without authority. What empathy gives each individual people is, because now I am more empathetic, I'm able to connect with someone faster, and that gives me influence with them, and without having authority. And that works in personal and professional life very powerfully.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I know we're up here on our time, and you're in a different time zone. So since we've been chatting, the sun has been rising behind you. Are there any last thoughts before we sign off?
I would say give it a shot. Try it out. It's free. Empathy has never, there's no data currently that exists that shows empathy has had a negative effect on someone. There has not have been a negative result. So what is, like, the reality is, give it a shot, download the app, check it out. It's something that can really shape your future and help learn about yourself more than just everyone else. The self-empathy part is also a core part of it. So to wrap up, I would say first, thank you for this opportunity. What a wonderful conversation. And I loved learning from you. This was an opportunity where I got to learn from you, Dennis, and thank you for that. And thank you again for the work you're doing, for the amazing community you're building on OutBüro. And I hope that people understand that vulnerability is not a weakness. Vulnerability is the strength. And once you actually wield it, you realize how powerful it is. And being able to be vulnerable and sharing your story, it is hard. I get it. It's not easy. And so my hope is, by using by being part of the Jaago movement, we can create a world where people seek to understand each other, reduce that polarization, and see that vulnerability can actually heal our world.
Well, I'm with you there. Well, thank you, everyone, for staying tuned to the end of this video. Go ahead and reward yourself by clicking that subscribe or follow button on whichever app that you are viewing or listening to this to. As a reminder, you'll find us not only on the OutBüro.com website under episodes, you'll also find us on YouTube, Dailymotion, GetHappy.tv, now streaming to your living room television box, as well as over 14 podcasting apps, including Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Apple, and about 10 others. Join us today on OutBüro.com. Join groups on OutBüro.com to create interesting dialogues with topically, geographically, and industry-focused folks. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.